Order. Order. I call Minister Michael Gove to make a statement.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. With your permission, I'd like to make a statement on preparations for the end of the transition period. There are now just 100 days to go until the United Kingdom leaves the single market and the customs union. And this will be a moment of great opportunity, but also of significant change and challenge. It's vital that we all take the steps required to grasp those opportunities and to meet and master those challenges. The government is, of course, committed to negotiating a new free trade agreement with the EU before the end of the transition period, and those talks are progressing. But whatever the outcome of those negotiations, things will change for businesses and individuals as they trade with and travel to the EU. It is important that we as parliamentarians all understand that and that we all take action to prepare. Whether we secure a good FTA before January or not, whether we get a Canada-style deal or exit on Australian terms, we will have left the single market and the customs union. And that fact means adjustments for businesses trading with the EU, changes for citizens travelling to the EU, and of course new responsibilities for government in both scenarios. The superb civil servants at Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs and their colleagues across government are working with business to ensure that exporters and importers are ready for new rules. Every business trading with Europe will need to thoroughly familiarise itself with new customs procedures, and whether they develop the capacity in-house or work with a customs intermediary, enhanced preparation is vital. The government's invested in increasing customer agents' capacity, it's supported growth in the sector, and of course it stands ready to do more. And HMRC are also able to support businesses to secure the AEO, or consignor and consignee status, which eases the flow of goods. Businesses which are fully ready for life outside the customs union will also, of course, be better prepared for the growing number of export opportunities outside Europe as the UK establishes new trade relationships with partners across the globe following the highly successful conclusion of our new trade deal with Japan. And because preparing for customs procedures will be required with or without a free trade agreement, these adjustments can't, of course, be left until the last minute. More and more businesses are becoming fully prepared, but there are still many who've not quite taken the steps they need to. Our survey evidence indicates that while 78% of businesses have taken steps, just 24% believe that they're fully ready. Indeed, 43% of businesses actually believe the transition period will be extended, even though the deadline for any extension has now long passed, and the date that we leave the single market and the customs union is fixed in law and supported across this House. Now, this government's taking action to prepare for that date, with the EXO committee, the cabinet committee charged with preparations for the end of the transition period, now meeting almost daily, taking decisions on trader and hauler readiness, border infrastructure, and fisheries protection. The committee has now met 136 times since it was established, and it will continue to meet to make sure that we've taken all the steps required to prepare. But we also need businesses to prepare. The consequences of a lack of business preparedness will be not just economic opportunities missed for those companies who don't prepare, but potentially much wider disruption. That's why today we're publishing our reasonable worst-case scenario planning assumptions, indicating what could happen if we don't all secure improved preparedness. I should stress that this is not a prediction or a forecast, it's just a prudent exercise in setting out what could, in the worst circumstances, occur if we don't improve preparedness. And of course, if our neighbours decline to be pragmatic. The scenario builds on an estimate that only 50 to 70% of large businesses and just 20 to 40% of small and medium-sized enterprises would be ready for the strict application of new EU requirements. In those circumstances, that could mean that only between 30 and 60% of laden HGVs would arrive at the border with the necessary formalities completed for the goods on board. They'd therefore be turned back by the French border authorities, clogging the Dover to Calais crossing. In that scenario, flows across the critical short-stake crossings could be reduced by up to 60 to 80% compared to the normal rate, and in such circumstance, that could lead to queues of up to 7,000 HGVs in Kent. These queues and the associated disruption and delay would of course subside as unready businesses who had their goods turned back at the French border would not want to repeat the experience. But it is clearly far better that everyone is aware now of what is needed to prepare rather than to face additional disruption next year. And that's why we're publishing our reasonable worst-case scenario today. Not just because any prudent government always prepares contingency plans for the worst, but also to illustrate the costs of a lack of preparedness while there is still plenty of time to prepare. This government's committed to doing whatever it takes to help business, and we've brought in a comprehensive series of measures to help businesses and individuals adapt to the changes ahead. We're helping businesses which import by introducing new border controls on imports in stages, and full controls will only be imposed from July of next year. We've produced a comprehensive border operating model, which provides a simplified guide, complemented by the work of gov.uk for business, and we'll be publishing an updated version with more granular detail in coming weeks. We've invested £705 million in new technology, infrastructure, and jobs at the border. And we're ensuring extra personnel. Border Force have recruited more than 1,000 additional staff, with hundreds more being recruited now. And we've also made available more than £80 million in grants for organisations to recruit and train new customs agents to support an expanded customs intermediary sector. And of course, a new network of information and advice sites will help ensure that hauliers are up to speed with their new requirements and the correct paperwork. And of course, they'll be able to check their documentation as export ready using the new Smart Freight web portal. And of course, we've complemented all this activity with a public information campaign to help businesses prepare. The campaign communicates the actions that all businesses need to take before the end of the transition period, and there's a user-friendly checker tool on the gov.uk/transition page, which details exactly what businesses need to do. Now, the government's taking all these steps to help business prepare because change requires preparation. But change is what the British people voted for. Because, Madam Deputy Speaker, outside the single market and the customs union, the UK can exercise all the freedoms and flexibilities of a truly sovereign state. Outside the common agricultural policy, we can support our farmers better and enhance our natural environment. Outside the common fisheries policy, we can revive our coastal communities and improve our marine environment. We can strike new trade deals, which help developing nations grow faster and lower prices for consumers. We can develop tailored policies to better support new technologies and to level up our economy. We can invest the money that we currently send to Brussels in the NHS, in our science base, and in improving productivity in all the nations of the United Kingdom. We can develop free ports, which bring investment to overlooked communities. We can regulate more smartly, legislate more accountably, and strengthen our democracy. These are great prizes, and the British people voted in the 2016 referendum and the 2019 general election to make sure they were delivered. This government is committed to honouring those democratic choices, and I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Minister Rachel Reeves.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and to the Right Honourable Gentleman for advance sight of his statement this afternoon. The news today that there could soon be tailbacks of 7,000 lorries in Kent is quite extraordinary. I know the government has said that they are committed to building new infrastructure, but I didn't realise it meant concreting over the Garden of England. Today's warnings are based on a reasonable worst-case scenario. But given we have a reasonable worst-case government, we have to assume that these scenarios could play out quite soon. Looking at the letter to the road haulage industry, the government says that business should get ready. But what, Madam Deputy Speaker, about the government? There is a long list of promises for future in the letter. The UK government will be contacting haulage companies. They will be running targeted advertising. They will be publishing an updated haulier handbook. And they will launch advice stands at UK service stations. Madam Deputy Speaker, why aren't these essential prerequisites for a smooth transition not already here? It is all well and good to tell businesses to act now, but without the systems in place, frankly, it's like telling me to bake a cake, but forgetting to turn the oven on. Sectors from farming to haulage to car manufacturing are crying out for the government to get this right. These sectors are the backbone of British industry and they are vital to our everyday economy. If we don't listen to these experts, we will lose exports. I met with the Road Haulage Association last week. They are tearing their hair out. They have since met government ministers, and they described that meeting as a washout. Frankly, Madam Deputy Speaker, this is not good enough. In the summer, I visited the proposed Lorry park in Ashford, Kent, where construction had just begun. It was with some dismay that I later read that workmen had encountered a Saxon brick wall in their excavations. I hope, Madam Deputy Speaker, that this is not a metaphor, but can the Minister assure the House that progress here is on track? Another site apparently earmarked is in Ebbsfleet. It is currently a COVID testing centre. With the test, trace and isolate system on its knees, this would be farcical if it was not so serious. Is it really too much to ask from ministers a little bit of joined-up government? On the 4th of September, the government granted itself the power to build additional lorry parks in 29 local authority areas without consulting residents. Can the Minister tell us exactly where these facilities will be? It is the least that local people deserve. Will the Minister tell the House how many customs agents and intermediaries are trained and in place? This is so important for the system to work. In the summer, the government admitted that there would be £7 billion worth of additional bureaucracy for UK businesses. It is the last thing they need right now. So is this still the most accurate assessment on the costs for businesses? It has been estimated that 10 new IT systems will be needed to make our new trading relationship with the European Union work. Can the Minister list those IT systems and guarantee that they will be in place and fully operational on the 1st of January? Given, Madam Deputy Speaker, that we were promised a contact tracing app, first of all in May, and then in June, and then in July, and that it is now September, what assurance can the Minister give that this time the government will deliver that vital technology and that it will be working and that it will be delivered on time? Frankly, the government's track record does not inspire confidence. Madam Deputy Speaker, we just have 100 days until the end of the transitions period. Labour's message to both sides in this negotiation is clear. Stop the posturing and start negotiating. It is in our national interest, it is in all our interests, that the government get a deal and they get it soon so that business do have time to prepare. The Conservatives have had 3 Prime Ministers and 4 years since the referendum in 2016. We've seen serial incompetence and countless U-turns. I say to ministers, get a grip on preparations and get a grip now. The transition period comes to an end on the 31st of December. Can the Minister guarantee, not just to this House, but to the whole country, that we will be ready?
I'm very grateful to the Honourable Lady for her questions. She makes the point that there have been 3 Prime Ministers and 4 years since the referendum, and she alleges that there have been some U-turns. Well, this government's been consistent in its determination to honour that referendum result. If we're thinking of U-turns, then I think of the Labour Party, which at different times has been in favour of a referendum, in favour of extending the transition period, against our exit from the EU, and now seems to be resolutely in favour. I'm grateful that the Labour Party has now taken a decision to recognise that democratic verdict in 2016. But I think all of us, when we're reflecting on U-turns, flip-flops and changes of position, should exercise appropriate humility. Anyway, let me turn to the specific points. The Honourable Lady asked, of course, about what was required to do in order to prepare. And she made the point that, of course, we will be stepping up our intensive cooperation with business. But it was the case that the Chief Executive of the Port of Dover, when he appeared in front of the Future Relationship with the European Union Select Committee in June of this year, made it clear that it was possible at that point for any business to know exactly what was required, from the acquisition of a NIORI number to securing a customs intermediary or having in-house capacity. Everyone knew at that stage what would be required on our departure from the customs union and from the single market. So that information is there. And of course, one of the things that we want to do is to make sure that more and more businesses, including those who think that the transition period will be extended, realise, as the Honourable Lady quite rightly pointed out, that there is no turning back from this date and that we need all to be ready by the 1st of January. The Honourable Lady asked about our determination to secure a deal. We're absolutely determined to do everything that we can to secure a deal. But one of the purposes of this statement today is to underline that whether or not we secure a deal, because we're leaving the single market and the customs union, there are some activities that all businesses must engage in. And I hope that members of Parliament across the House, whatever their views on the merits of our departure from the European Union, will work with the government in order to ensure that business is directed towards the information it needs and given the support that it deserves. The Honourable Lady also made a reference to her visit to Ashford, and I'm grateful to her and to others for drawing attention to the need for additional infrastructure at or near the border, and for the need for this government investment in order to make sure that we're ready. And of course, the Ashford Mojo site will be available to provide transit facilities for those who are exporting, and then from July 2021, it will also provide facilities for those who are importing as well. And I'm grateful to everyone who's played a part in making sure that that site will be ready on time. She referred to the Ebbsfleet site. The Ebbsfleet site had actually been acquired by HMRC some time ago in preparation for a potential no-deal exit before the withdrawal agreement was secured. It was then temporarily allowed to become a testing site. The testing facilities have now moved to another location in Kent, and Ebbsfleet, along with North Weald, is available as a transit site. It's important that this government, like all governments, ensures not only that we provide for the public health of our people, but also for the free flow of commerce. She also made reference to customs agents and intermediaries. The £80 million that has been provided is a sum that hasn't yet been fully drawn down, and I hope that our exchanges today will encourage businesses and others to ensure that they do have access to that money. And she also asked about IT systems. IT systems like IPAFs have been in place for some time now. That is the new IT system that will replace Traces, which is an EU system which, of course, we will no longer have access to. But there are other systems like SmartFreight and GVMS, which are in operation and being tested with business now. It's vitally important that all of us recognise that, as I said earlier, business needs our support in order to navigate, to meet and master these challenges, and also to take advantage of these opportunities. And the government stands ready to work with everyone across this House of Commons in order to ensure that business is ready and at what is undoubtedly a difficult time for the economic life of our country, we all do what we can to help.
Damien Green.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I can assure my right honourable friend that the so-called Saxon wall on the Ashford site is in fact a myth. It's not Saxon and it's not holding at work. But the prospect of 7,000 trucks queuing to cross the channel will send a chill through my constituents, because we know what effect that has on all the roads in Kent, and it's disastrous. So I very much support my right honourable friend in his work to prepare the road haulage industry for the end of the transition period. But can I ask about the government's own preparations, and specifically the SmartFreight system, which he mentioned, which is essential for the smooth running of traffic across the channel? Can he give a guarantee that that system will be fully up and running and operational from January?
Well, my right honourable friend makes a number of very important points. I'm grateful for him clearing up the point about archaeology, which I failed to address in my response to the honourable lady, but his expertise in this area is greater. He's absolutely right. What we want to do is to avoid the level of congestion that this reasonable worst-case scenario sets out. And he's also absolutely right that that requires people to work together. Yes, it requires not just the haulage industry, but in particular those goods exporters who are committing goods to haulage to be ready in time. But part of that is the SmartFreight system. That system has been developed, it's being shared with business, and we want to make sure that people use a relatively simple process in order to get what will become known as a Kent Access Permit, which means that they can then proceed smoothly through Kent because they do have the material required. If they don't have the material required, then it will be the case that through policing, ANPR cameras and other means, we'll do our very best to ensure that his constituents are not inconvenienced.
We now go to the SNP spokesperson, Pete Wishart.
And thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. So today is the day where all the Brexit chickens come home to roost, only of course they won't, because they'll be sitting in a 7,000 strong lorry queue in a Kent motorway for 2 days waiting to be dispatched. And I remember the days of the easiest deal in history, having our cake and eating it while observing the sunny uplands, when even the Duchess himself told us that we hold all the cards. Well, it seems the only card we're holding is the Joker with his spitting image moosh all over the front of it. What I don't understand is, why does he continue with this charade of seeking a deal when we know it's the no deal that they all want and all covet? And can I tell him that the Scottish people are also scenario planning, that we're planning our best case scenario when we get out of rogue state UK before the worst of this Brexit madness consumes our beautiful nation. And his European counterparts must be looking forward to the next round of talks with all the relish of a vegan being served a platter of chlorinated chicken. And we're told that the talks are at a delicate stage. They're so delicate that the EU are close to telling the UK to go and get stuffed. And you have to say you could see their point. They're having to deal with a UK that's prepared to tear up the withdrawal agreement that was oven ready and the greatest deal ever just a few months ago, and in the process break international law. But there's one good thing that's come out of all of this, and that is it's focused Scottish minds on the type of future that we want. A future in rogue state UK with all the horrors of their low deal, no deal Brexit, or a future as a normal European nation, making our own decisions, free of this clown shoe government. As a famous son of Aberdeen, he must know which direction the Scottish people are travelling in.
Well, I don't know where to begin. Chickens, cakes, those questions are a mixed metaphors, the like of which even the most impressive Macca would be proud of. It was a remarkable, they usually are remarkable performances. Can I say thank you to the Right Honourable Gentleman for referring to the fact that Spitting Image have fashioned a rubber puppet in my likeness. It's one of the greatest honours that has ever been paid to me, and I hope that other members of the House will enjoy that recognition in due course. But to turn to his specific questions, he asks about chickens. One of the things that we will be doing, actually, is that we will be making sure that we prioritise day-old chicks and fish and shellfish from Scottish harbours in order to make sure that they reach the fish market in Boulogne without let or impediment, specifically because as we take back control of our waters and access to our marine resources enables Scotland to get thousands of new jobs and millions in new investment, so we want to be able to take full advantage of that. And it is sadly one of the decisions that the Scottish Government have taken that they wish to re-enter the European Union, give up access to that bounty, and to sell the coastal communities of Scotland short. And I think that I may gently suggest that that's probably a mistake as well. He makes the point that the best case scenario for Scotland is independence. That's long been his position. But of course, while we set out to answer questions in this House, there are many questions about independence that have not been answered. What will be the currency that an independent Scotland would use? How would UK pensions be guaranteed in an independent Scotland? What would the replacement for the furlough scheme in an independent Scotland be when the HM Treasury is no longer capable of providing that money? And as the Growth Commission of Andrew Wilson has pointed out, an independent Scotland would have to pay a premium for borrowing on international markets. So no pound, no pension, and poorer, an independent Scotland, unless he can come up with better answers, is the worst case of all.
David Mundell.
Mr. Speaker, can I ask a question that actually matters in relation to jobs and the economy of Scotland? As my right honourable friend will be aware, with only 100 days to go to the end of the transition period, can he confirm that the UK government has given up on the EU resolving the Airbus-Boeing dispute, which has led to very damaging tariffs on Scotch malt whisky in the US? And will the UK government pursue a bilateral resolution of that dispute to see those tariffs lifted and enable the Secretary of State for International Development to negotiate a free trade agreement which sees such tariffs banished forever?
Honourable friend is absolutely right to raise this issue. It is because of the EU's mishandling of the Airbus project that the US imposed tariffs on malt whisky where they did not exist beforehand, hitting one of Scotland's most important exports. But the International Trade Secretary, my right honourable friend Liz Truss, has been directly negotiating on Scotland's behalf with the US to see these tariffs lifted. She's already secured progress on gin, and I hope that she will secure progress on whisky as well. And it is the case that the excellent Karen Betts, the Chief Executive of the Scotch Whisky Association, has of course been appointed explicitly as an advisor to the Secretary of State in order to help ensure that the UK government, with its negotiating weight, can do for the Scots whisky industry what the EU was not capable of doing.
Select Committee Chair Hilary Benn.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm grateful to the Secretary of State for his statement, although I think a queue of 7,000 lorries wouldn't be much of the great prize for the country. As he knows, for months now, those who move goods for a living across the short straits have been warning ministers that systems and training won't be ready in time. And now the industry says it is being fitted up to take the blame for the government's failure to grasp, in the words of one logistics expert involved in the talks, real-world complexities. Now, the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster just told the House that the Goods Vehicle Movement Service and the Smart Freight IT systems are in operation. When did that happen?
Well, they have been developed. They are in operation now. We're refining with business exactly how they should operate for businesses' benefit.
Andrew Mitchell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. May I congratulate my right honourable friend on his spitting image puppet and the other literary prowess visited on him in recently published diaries this week. May I remind my right honourable friend of his considerable generosity in coming to attend in the West Midlands a round table with manufacturers some 12 months ago, which he did with our outstanding West Midlands Mayor, Andy Street. And will he, as he discharges his most important duties set out in his statement today, remember two of the points that were raised at that round table with him? The first is concern about just-in-time supply chains. And the second is the importance of removing tariffs on finished goods and components in those supply chains.
Well, I'm very grateful to my right honourable friend. I wasn't aware that there were any diaries being published this week, but obviously I'll look out anxiously whenever I will look out anxiously when I next pass Waterstones and Camberley. But on the substantive point he makes, he's absolutely right. There's no better champion of the automotive sector than the West Midlands Combined Authority Mayor Andy Street. The roundtable that I had with him, the opportunity I've also had with Andy Street to visit JLR, to talk to Ralph Speth and others, has impressed upon me the vital importance of doing everything we can to support that sector on which so many jobs depend, and that is why we're so anxious to secure a deal.
Ben Lake.
Aware of the considerable concern that Welsh ports such as Fishguard and Holyhead will be severely impacted by any delays to the introduction of the goods vehicle management and smart freight systems. Could the Minister therefore tell the House what proportion of vehicles crossing the Irish Sea from Wales to Ireland he expects would face disruption under the government's reasonable worst-case scenario?
Goods coming from Ireland to Wales should not face impediment because we're staging our processes in the way that I described. Goods going the other way, again, much depends on the determination made by EU member states about the processes that they will apply. But we are working with the Welsh Assembly Government, the Senedd, in order to invest in a facility near Holyhead in Anglesey in order to ensure that transit and other procedures can facilitate the flow of traffic and trade.
Sarah Brickcliffe.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The people of Hamburg and Haslingden voted overwhelmingly to leave the EU and for someone who would respect their decision, and yet they're still urging me to press the government not to extend the transition period. So can my right honourable friend confirm that the EU has accepted that we will not accept or seek an extension to the transition period, and that at the end of this year we will deliver on our promise to the British people and regain our economic and political independence?
Yes, no, my honourable friend makes absolutely the right point. The certainty of knowing that we will leave on that date and the publication of the information today, I hope will help business to prepare with certainty for the end of the transition period. And every Conservative Member of Parliament was elected on a manifesto making it clear that we would extend the transition period on the end the transition period on the 31st of December. One of the difficulties that we have in this House is that while the opposition front bench quite rightly support that position, Labour politicians in power, like the First Minister of Wales and the Mayor of London, take a very different position. And, you know, the leader of the Labour Party was talking yesterday about patriotism. One of the things that I think would be patriotic if he were to make it clear that Labour was united in backing the British people.
We now go to Fergal Clark.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The government has promised its Shared Prosperity Fund to replace EU structural funding for regeneration and growth since 2017. Yet, despite originally promising a consultation, we haven't seen one. There haven't even been any engagement events since the Prime Minister took office. Madam Deputy Speaker, when will the Minister publish the framework through which the shared prosperity will work to keep it accountable and prevent pork barrel politics and bungs to target seats?
Well, the Honourable Lady makes a very important point. It will be the Secretary of State at the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government who will be outlining how the Shared Prosperity Fund will be distributed. But she's absolutely right. As a result of our departure from the European Union, we will have more money to spend on our priorities, and we will, of course, spend that money on what the Prime Minister has called the levelling up agenda. There are parts of our country, overlooked communities, undervalued families, neglected by Labour local authorities for far too long, that now have Conservative MPs in this place, and it is vitally important that their advocacy on behalf of their constituents to improve their productivity is supported, and that's why everything from new free ports to increased investment will go to those areas which have been neglected by Labour for far too long.
Sir Geoffrey Clifton-Brown.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the figures that my right honourable friend has given today in terms of business preparedness for the 31st of December are concerning. Isn't the important advice that he's given today that those businesses should either do the paperwork themselves or they should go and get an intermediary to do it on their behalf?
My right honourable friend is absolutely right. We want to help and to support business. That's why we've provided the funding that we have. But one of the reasons for publishing the reasonable worst case scenario today was to draw attention to the fact that if we don't all work together, then there will be disruption. But if we do work together, there are huge opportunities to be seized.
Kevin Brennan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. 7,000 HGV lorries parked end to end would stretch from this building to Dover. That's the scale of the problem the Secretary of State is setting out. Where are the 29 extra lorry parks going to be? We need to know that. This is about government preparedness. His statement seems to be all about passing the blame onto business for the chaos being caused by his government.
No, the right honourable gentleman, in emphasising that figure, is helping. Because, of course, what we want to do is to avert that scenario. And as I pointed out, it is not a prediction, but it is a warning. And there is a responsibility, he's quite right, on government, and that's why we have invested in the sites in Ebbsfleet and North Weald, in Ashford and elsewhere, including Warrington and the West Midlands. It's also the case that should there be specific areas of traffic management in Kent that we need to deal with, that steps have been taken with the Kent Resilience Forum to do just that. But the reason for publishing the scenario today is to seek to avert precisely that happening. And I hope that he'll work with businesses in his constituency in order to make sure that they let government know what more it is that they need in order to be ready.
Alan Cairns.
Deputy Speaker. The most senior Labour politician in office in the UK is the Welsh First Minister. Now, he has called for the transition period to be extended beyond the end of the year. Now, some people see that as a way of avoiding or delaying Brexit. Now, I can advise my right honourable friend that the Welsh people voted in greater numbers than the average across the UK to leave the European Union. Can my right honourable friend therefore reassure me that the end of the year will be the end of the transition period?
Well, my right honourable friend makes a very important point. The result across the United Kingdom, because we voted as one United Kingdom, was clear, but it's also the case that support for leaving the European Union was very strong across Wales. I've got great respect for the First Minister of Wales, and we've worked well together in dealing with the COVID pandemic. But I do think that my right honourable friend is absolutely right. It would be sensible now for all politicians, rather than saying that the transition period should end and creating that illusory prospect that if we work together in order to prepare for the 31st of December.
Christine Jardine.
Thank you very much. The road haulage industry has been talked about much in this debate, and they did keep and have kept food on our shelves in the supermarkets and medicines and in our pharmacies through the most recent crisis. The report says, and the statement says, that the government has put aside £80 million for customs agents. Can the House hear, please, how many agents do we have at the moment? How many will we need on the 1st of January? And how many will this training provide the 1st of January to ensure that the haulage industry can keep operating?
Well, the Honourable Lady is absolutely right. The haulage industry has been doing a fantastic job, and I make no criticism of the haulage industry or individual hauliers, quite the opposite. Most of the work that will be required by the companies which are exporting rather than the haulage industry, and it is they who will either hire customs intermediaries to do the work for them, or, as my right honourable friend pointed out, do that work in-house. Now, some of that work is being done in-house, some of it is done by major players, some by companies like Kuhn & Nagel, who are real experts in that area. The market is moving. The response that we've had from some of them is that, particularly in the last couple of weeks, there has been significantly greater call for their services, and they have been recruiting. But the £80 million that we have has not been entirely drawn down yet. And of course, we keep under review the amount that we are providing in order to ensure that if more is needed, more can be provided.
Ben Everett.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I'm sure we're all aware that when we finally leave the transition period at the end of the year, we will also be leaving behind the Common Agricultural Policy, which has done such damage not only to agricultural economics, but to our environment as well. Perhaps my right honourable friend could detail how the system that replaces it that we are preparing will be better for farmers, fairer, better for our agricultural economy, for our environment, and also support our target of net zero.
Well, my honourable friend makes a very important point, and as the DEFRA Secretary of State has pointed out, as we move away from the Common Agricultural Policy, we move to a system where farmers can be supported with public money to provide public goods, whether that's increasing the organic content of their soil or contributing to better and cleaner management of our waters. But it's also the case that as the recent trade deal that my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for International Trade, has secured, we have improved market access for our superb produce to new markets.
Jim Shannon.
Deputy Speaker, and thank you to the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster for his statement today. Last Friday, I had the opportunity to meet Gordon's Pharmacy in Newton Ards and listen to these things. And as a type 2 diabetic, which I declare an interest, who listened to many saying insulin and other medications would not be able to be sourced post-Brexit. Can the Chancellor tell me what progress has been made to ensure that the supply of medicines from the EU to the UK and then from GB mainland to Northern Ireland is smoothly continued after the transition period ends? Thank you.
The Honourable Gentleman raises a very, very important consideration because of the operation of the Northern Ireland Protocol. And I was discussing with the Minister of State at the Department of Health and Social Care and also officials in the Northern Ireland office and other departments yesterday how we can make sure that the supply of medical goods continues uninterrupted to Northern Ireland. And he's quite right. One of the single most important is insulin because of the particular requirements that diabetics like he and indeed my father face.
Mary Robinson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'm grateful for the statement setting out the current position. During these uncertain times, it is vital that businesses have as much clarity as possible, especially the many businesses in Cheadle that rely on trade with the EU. In addition to the preparations my right honourable friend has outlined, we can give those businesses the certainty they deserve by agreeing a free trade deal with the EU this year. Can my right honourable friend therefore reassure my constituents that the government continues to work towards that prime objective?
Yes, absolutely. The government is absolutely committed to securing a Canada-style free trade agreement. One of the difficulties that we've had in the talks is that the European Union, as our negotiator David Frost has pointed out, still hasn't come to grips with the fact that we will be a sovereign equal, not in the size of our economy, but in our democratic mandate. And therefore, there are still one or two sticking points because they're seeking to tie us to their rules rather than recognising we will follow our own path. But I'm confident we can overcome those difficulties and secure a free trade agreement, which would be in everyone's interests. But of course, many of the preparations that business requires to undertake are the same, whether or not we have an FTA or not.
Stephen Farry.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Businesses in Northern Ireland and elsewhere urgently need to see the detail on the border operating model between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Previously, the Chancellor for the Duchy of Lancaster promised that would be published by the end of July. While it is desirable that we see the outcome of the Joint Committee and future relationship negotiations, they're not essential for this. So can he give a revised commitment as to when we're going to see that?
Yes, I mean, the Honourable Gentleman makes a very good point. The Joint Committee should, God willing, meet next Monday in Brussels. I'll be seeing Maros Šefčovič then as we seek to make progress in these matters. He will know that we made more than £200 million available through the Trader Support Service and Support for IT to help businesses in Northern Ireland. And indeed, even though it's been a subject of contention in this House, the provisions within the UK Internal Market Bill are there to make sure that Northern Ireland's businesses do have a guarantee that whatever happens, they will not be required to have export declarations when goods move from Northern Ireland to Great Britain, because the principle of unfettered access is so important.
Deputy Speaker, I welcome my right honourable friend's statement, and particularly the extra 705 million for infrastructure at our border. Would my right honourable friend be able to update us a little more on the technological solutions and how they're developing, such as the smart freight service, in order to facilitate movement across the borders?
Yes, I'm very, very grateful to the honourable lady for my honourable friend, I should say. Sorry, for making that point. Yes, there are a number of systems. So, for example, I mentioned earlier the IPAF system, which is critical for those in the agri-food sector, which has been developed for some time now. The smart freight system and the GVMS system are being operated within government at the moment in consultation with business, and we hope that they will go live so that they are there for all to see in their ideal form in the course of the next few weeks.
Daniel Zeigner.
Thank you. In just 100 days, all food exports to the EU will require an export health certificate and an authorised vet to sign that off. Do we have enough vets to do that? And also, I understand £80 million has been made available for the 50,000 custom agents required. Can we be told how much of the money has been drawn down and they're in place? And as a former IT person, can I ask him, is he really confident that the IT systems are going to be in place and working?
Three very good points. On the question of vets, yes, but there is a requirement on every part of the United Kingdom to play their part. So we've been talking with, for example, the Northern Ireland Executive about making sure that the specific need for vets in the new border control posts in Northern Ireland is satisfied. It is the case that there are vets and others who can carry out this job across the UK. But I would say that, for example, I hope, fingers crossed, that the Scottish Government have provided enough money to Aberdeenshire Council in order to make sure that those who provide export health certificates and catch certificates in the harbours of Fraserburgh and Peterhead are in place. I don't think voters in either Fraserburgh or Peterhead would forgive the Scottish Government if they hadn't made that investment and had used the money elsewhere. I'm sure they wouldn't have done. On the point about IT, it is the case that we're working hard internally and with authoritative expertise to make sure that those IT systems will work. I don't think any of us can make a confident prediction that everything will always be perfect, but it is the case that some of the very, very best people in government and in the private sector are committed to making it work.
Joe Gideon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Would my right honourable friend agree that as we reach the end of the transition period, as well as seeking a positive future relationship with the European Union as a sovereign independent nation, we are well positioned to take advantage of new global opportunities? And will he join with me in congratulating advanced ceramics research company Lucidian in my constituency, which is set to receive a £1 million boost as a result of the new Japan trade deal that the UK and Japan have agreed in principle? Lucidian's joint venture with the Japanese partner will bring new jobs to Stoke-on-Trent Central, and plans for an advanced ceramics campus in North Staffordshire a step closer.
Well, I agree with my honourable friend. That is unmitigated good news. The ceramics sector is well placed to take advantage of new international trade deals, and it couldn't have a more effective champion than my honourable friend.
We now go to Sir Mark Hendrick.
Madam Deputy Speaker, with the end of the EU transition period fast approaching and our borders with the EU woefully ill-prepared for the trading arrangements a no-deal Brexit will bring, may I ask the Secretary of State how the £700 million he has announced will, over the 3 months he has available, recruit and retrain hundreds of new customs officers required to carry out border checks, and with so little time left to fully test, install and commission the smart infrastructure technology required to implement those checks. Isn't this just another example of what the whole of Brexit has been about? Wishful thinking and self-deception rather than the acceptance of the reality on the ground.
The first part of the honourable gentleman's question was, I think, very opposite. The £705 million that's being made available is being made available, of course, to ports and will also help pay for inland infrastructure. But I should stress that much of that infrastructure will only be required when we ourselves are imposing checks, which won't come until July of next year. But it's also the case that any individual member of this House who will be seeing infrastructure built in their constituency will be contacted, if they haven't already been, by my colleagues Lord Agnew and the Parliamentary Under-Secretary in my department, the member for Upminster.
Aaron Bell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The people of Newcastle under Lyme voted very clearly to leave the European Union,
But contrary to the wild claims from the SNP spokesman earlier, they're not seeking a no deal. They want a good, fair, constructive deal negotiated in good faith with the EU. But they do want this over and done with. And so would he join me and them in rejecting the calls from the Labour Party for senior members such as the Welsh First Minister, such as the Mayor of London, to extend the transition period? We can't have that to happen, because if that happens, then that will only lead to more uncertainty for business. We need to move on.
My honourable friend makes absolutely an important point. We've set out a timetable. Sticking to that timetable will enable people, I hope, to take all of the steps required. And he makes the point that we don't seek, in this side of the House, no deal. Quite the opposite. We're keen to seek a deal. But one question that's never been answered is, if there were ever a vote for independence in Scotland, I'm sure there won't be ever. But if there were ever, the SNP have never made clear whether they would rely on there being a negotiated settlement or whether they would go for a no-deal Skexit as well. It's one of the many, many questions that the SNP decline to answer.
We now go to Andrew Gwynn.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I was listening very carefully to the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster about business preparedness, not least because it's only 3 months to the end of the transition period. Businesses in the food and drink industry in my constituency would love to be able to be ready for Brexit, but there's no guidance yet as to what labels businesses need to use to legally sell their goods in the EU and in Northern Ireland next year. When will the government announce these measures so that the food and drink manufacturers aren't held back from making the preparations they need?
The honourable gentleman makes a very important point. Some of that detail has already been published, but there is more that it depends on the negotiations. But if he wants to get the companies in his constituency that have particular concerns to get in touch with me direct, I'll work with him in order to provide them with the information that we have.
Sir Desmond Swain.
The Markets Bill doesn't break any law, does it?
This government believes entirely in the rule of law.
Patricia Gibson.
Madam Deputy Speaker, this UK government fought an election and won a majority in this House on the basis that it had an oven-ready Brexit. And in March last year, the Honourable Gentleman said, and I quote, "We did not vote to leave without a deal." Now we are staring down the barrel of a no-deal Brexit, the consequences of which will be magnified by the economic fallout from Brexit. What does he say? What does the Honourable Gentleman say to those who voted for his government on the basis that it had an oven-ready Brexit and now feel utterly betrayed?
Well, I haven't met anyone in that position. And the truth is that, of course, we left on the 31st of January. The one thing I do increasingly find are lots of people in Scotland who, the more they look at the position of the Scottish National Party and the Scottish Government, are becoming yes to no voters. And that's the growing trend, I would say.
Stephen Hammond.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I welcome my right honourable friend's statement? He will know that there are two important industries in the UK that begin with the letter F. One contributes 1.4 billion to the UK economy. The other contributes 132 billion and employs over 1 million people. So can I ask my right honourable friend, in his July statement, he committed the UK to upholding international norms so there is a free flow of capital and efficient markets. Is he convinced that he can still deliver those international norms so there is delegation? And is he convinced that there will be equivalence for UK financial services in July 2021?
I'm confident of that. One of the things about equivalence is that it is what's called an autonomous process within the EU. And I think since the Prime Minister drew attention to the slow progress of some of those autonomous processes, to be very fair to the EU, that has meant an acceleration. So I am confident, yes.
Justin Madders.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I don't think in response to earlier questions we've actually had clarity over how many customs agents are in place now. So can the Secretary of State provide us with that figure? And can he also guarantee that when the time comes, any business that needs the services of a custom agent will be able to access one?
Well, customs agents are provided by the market. And of course, it is the case that there are a number of customs intermediaries whose businesses are growing. There are a number of other businesses who will employ people in that role. And just as I cannot precisely state at any given time in a dynamic market how many people are doing exactly what job, what I can state is that the £80 million that we've made available has not yet been fully drawn down. But any company that is in this area will know that come the 1st of January, there will be an increased demand for their work. So this is an opportunity to expand, and the government stands ready to help that.
Brendan Clark-Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I welcome this government's UK internal market bill as we reach the end of the transition period and take back control? One of the issues that's been raised many times during the debates was the EU's refusal to give us third country listing. Would my right honourable friend agree with me that this third country listing is vital in agreeing a deal with the European Union? And can he assure me that he will continue to push to make them take reasonable steps to make sure this happens?
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right, and the reluctance or the slow pace in granting third country status for food exports to the UK has been concerning. But thanks to the Prime Minister drawing attention to this issue, progress is being made.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Further to the question asked by the honourable gentleman for Wimbledon, the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster will know that financial services firms in the UK generate a huge number of jobs, a not insignificant number of which are held by my constituents. So can he tell the House, therefore, exactly what progress has been made on the vital issue of achieving equivalence and what remains still to be sorted out?
Well, the honourable gentleman makes an important point. Equivalence is decided by the EU. It is an autonomous process separate from, but occurring in parallel with the negotiations. And obviously, as I mentioned earlier, the Prime Minister having drawn attention to the slow pace in these processes, we have seen an acknowledgement of that on the side of the EU. But I should also say, obviously the EU is a sovereign equal, it will make its own decisions, but EU businesses having access to the broad and deep capital markets that we have in this country helps EU businesses. And if it was the case that they were to cut themselves off from our capital markets and our financial services, then the cost of their transactions would increase and their shareholders would lose out.
Richard Holden.
Madam Deputy Speaker, this government was elected with an overwhelming mandate to get Brexit done. In fact, substantially, in order to ensure that their 2016 vote was respected, constituencies like mine and others across the Blue Wall returned Conservative MPs for the first time ever. Can my right honourable friend confirm that, in order to give both businesses clarity and to respect the will of the people of North West Durham, there will be no extension to transition?
Yes, the honourable gentleman is a brilliant advocate for the people of Consett and the whole of his constituency, and there won't be an extension.
Chris Stevens.
Speaker, in the worst-case scenario that the Secretary of State has outlined, on the basis of no employment bill, which the government committed to, and the European Union looking to strengthen workers' rights on zero-hour contract workers, agency workers and those workers susceptible to short-term shift changes, is the government still committed to at least matching employment protections of those of the European Union?
Hear, hear.
The question from the honourable gentleman, I know he has a distinguished background in the trade union movement and elsewhere in defending workers' rights, and I'd like to pay tribute to his work in that area. And yes, we do want to ensure that we protect workers' rights, and we will always look at what the EU and other jurisdictions are doing to see where we can match and, where possible, exceed the protections offered.
Young.
Deputy Speaker, I and many of my constituents want to see super trawlers banned from destroying our marine wildlife and damaging our fishing towns, something that we can't do while part of the EU. I know my right honourable friend has long been committed to support our fisheries as we leave the EU, so can he confirm that after December the 31st, we will have the ability to stop foreign super trawlers operating in our seas, and at a time when our negotiations are at their fiercest, will he stand firm on our commitment to take back control of our waters?
My honourable friend is absolutely right. One of the benefits of departing from the EU is that we can safeguard our marine environment from predators, and so we will take all the steps necessary to do so.
Paula Lockhart.
Madam Deputy Speaker, 7,000 truck-long queues in Kent and 2-day delays to trade would be disastrous for UK businesses, but so too would any delays and queues as a consequence of imposed checks within the UK as a result of the repugnant NI protocol. What assurances can my right honourable friend give to me and businesses in Northern Ireland that no such delays will feature at Lorry, and will he give an assurance to meet with me and the major agri-food sector businesses in the not too distant future?
I'm very grateful to the honourable lady for raising that, and also for the opportunity I had to visit Ulster Carpets in her constituency over the course of the summer. And it is the case the government's committed to making sure that the Northern Ireland Protocol operates in such a way as to not in any way disadvantage Northern Ireland's agri-food businesses, and I'd be delighted to meet them with her.
Sir Edward Lee.
Despite all these scare stories, surely there's no bar to a deal. We're not going to undercut the EU, surely, on state aid. We're not going to return to picking winners on all that rubbish. In terms of regulation of business, we're not going to create a bargain based in the economy. We're not going to produce rust buckets like the Morris Minor I drove to university with a hole in the floor in 1968. But there's breaking news just now that if the deal is conducted late, there indeed may not be an extension to the transition period, but there may be a 2-year implementation period. So what I'd like to have now from the Secretary of State is an absolute commitment, no extension to transition, no implementation period. We want a clean break, as we promised the electorate, at the end of this year.
Absolutely.
Everything the right honourable gentleman said, I completely agreed with. But apart from one thing, I can't believe that he went to university in 1968. He looks much younger than that.
Shion Wara.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And this morning I met with the North East Chamber of Commerce and local businesses, and we discussed the massive investment in technology and digital skills required by the pandemic to move processes, services and products online. Now they have another transition to face. So will he list each IT system which a business will have to interface with, and when it will be available to be tested by them so that they can begin the process of preparedness?
Yes, the border operating model, which we published earlier, outlines the IT systems. We published in July, outlines the IT systems with which business will interact. But of course, we're augmenting and updating it, and it'll be published later this month.
We now go to Damien Collins.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Does the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster accept that even this worst case scenario situation of 7,000 queuing lorries would be intolerable for people in Kent and in my constituency? Even if it was only half that bad, it would still require the closure of the coastbound M20. And can he assure us that he will do all he can to make sure that that is not the reality that people are confronted with next year?
My honourable friend makes a very, very good point. It's precisely because we want to avoid that scenario that we're sharing it today, in order that government can be held to account for doing everything possible to avoid that, and also so that we can work with business in order to avoid that. Now, we've got to be ready for the worst, but which is why we have taken appropriate contingency plans. But in order to avert that scenario, we want to work with my honourable friend and those in his constituency and businesses everywhere in order to ensure that we can be ready. And I have to say that Eurotunnel, of course, in his constituency have been brilliant in the support that they've been given the business sector as well.
Letter 7 withdrawn, so we go to Bill Wiggin.
Does my right honourable friend think the EU will lose in the event of no deal? And isn't this figure the sort of thing that is not helped by senior Labour politicians suggesting that we might extend the transition period?
Yeah. Well, my right honourable friend is absolutely correct that no deal is in nobody's interests, and the fact that the First Minister of Wales or the Mayor of London are holding out the prospect of an extension of the transition period doesn't contribute to the concentration of minds, and to be fair to the Honourable Lady, the productive work required in order to secure a deal.
Alistair Carmichael.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the London School of Economics estimate that the no-deal Brexit could lead to a 63% decrease in exports to the European Union. For the salmon farmers, for the crofters producing lamb and for the shell fishermen in my constituency, that could be absolutely ruinous. What comfort can the Chancellor of the Duchy give to these people in my constituency whose livelihood depends on that export market?
Well, the right honourable gentleman makes an important point. And one of the things that the government has always stressed is that in the event of a no-deal exit, the sectors that would be most adversely affected by tariffs would be in the agriculture sector. And it hits, in particular, red meat producers particularly hard, which is why we're anxious to avoid that outcome and to secure a deal. Come what may, it will be the case that there will be new processes, but also new markets for producers in Orkney and Shetland. And I'll work with him in order to make sure that whatever eventuality, we support the high-quality producers in his constituency.
Question from Deanna Davidson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My right honourable friend will know that I share his vivacious optimism about Britain's future as an independent sovereign trading nation. But the farmers of Teesdale and Weardale are understandably concerned about what happens if we get to the end of the year without an agreement. So can I ask my right honourable friend just to reassure the House, to reassure my constituents that all is being done by our negotiators to reach that deal? And does he agree with me that actually the future of Britain's trading policy, our independence as a trading nation, will provide great opportunities for our agricultural sector?
Well, My honourable friend, I'm grateful to my honourable friend for attributing to me vivacity as well as optimism. I'm certainly optimistic, but it's those who were elected in the 2019 general election on our benches who provide the vivacity, including herself. But she's absolutely right to raise the concerns of farmers in Teesdale and Weardale, and indeed across the North East. As I mentioned in response to the previous question, those who are red meat producers are those who, in the event of no deal, most need our support. But it's also those who are red meat producers, particularly lamb exporters and sheep farmers, who have a great deal to gain. One of the biggest consumers of lamb and sheep meat in the world is the US. At the moment, our access to the US market is restricted. It is one of many markets, including markets in the Far East and the Middle East, to which we could have access. And my honourable friend's advocacy on behalf of the farming sector and on behalf of free trade shows the way to future prosperity for the constituents that she serves so well.
Thank you. Point of order, Wendy Chamberlain.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. We were informed yesterday that the Paymaster General calls are set to resume. Now, members will remember that these calls were used earlier this year while the House was not sitting due to the coronavirus pandemic, and many members were very concerned at the lack of opportunity for scrutiny during that period.